Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Boogie Board Tiki Bar. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Henry Schuck. You know him as the co-founder and CEO of ZoomInfo. Henry, thank you so much for doing this today.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Now, you're in Boston. We're recording this just before the holiday season. How is the holiday season in the cold weather city of Boston?
It is great so far. The end of the year is always the busiest time for ZoomInfo. We always have really big Decembers. So I'm in the office through the end of the year, and we've got a bunch of folks here who are talking to customers and prospects. And so it's always a good time to be at December is always a good time to be at ZoomInfo. The weather hasn't been too bad in Boston either, so not a lot to complain about.
Good deal. Yeah, always big energy on a sales floor in December.
Yeah.
So that's good stuff. So we always start in the way back when machine. If I was talking to an 8-year-old Henry, I would assume he did not yet have visions of ZoomInfo. What would young Henry tell me he wanted to be when he grew up?
Think he would have told you he wanted to be the president of the United States.
Okay. What do you think inspired
Or
that?
at least the 9-year-old Henry. What inspired that? I don't know. Bill Clinton was president at the time. He had a daughter who was like kind of close to my age. So I was paying attention to politics. It felt like a big, impactful job. And I kind of believed that anything I wanted to become, I could. And so that felt like a big, meaty goal.
Yeah, it definitely is. And you've credited your mom for instilling some of that grit and work ethic. Obviously, you've achieved ambitious goals. What specific lessons was it that you took from her?
I think my mom was a nurse. She worked 3 jobs when we were growing up. She never had a day off, was constantly working to provide for our family. And I think that made me believe that hard work was a necessity to success. And so if I could never imagine a time where I wouldn't be working as hard as I possibly could, and felt like it would be disrespectful to her commitment. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing. I've taken that mentality through school and work and my professional career. It's like the same kind of mentality I expect from those people around me as well. So definitely an impactful lesson to learn through. I don't think she was trying to teach a lesson. It was just necessity, but taught a lesson in the process.
Absolutely. And I've studied a lot of the ZoomInfo story and your story within that. One thing I couldn't find, and this is, in famous entrepreneurial stories, there's often a link to childhood. If you think about Steve Jobs, he's calling Bill Hewlett for computer parts. Estee Lauder is creating, skin creams at an early age. I could not find this link for Henry Schuck. So am I missing one in childhood? Was there some foreshadowing that you were going to be in the realm of ZoomInfo?
I think the closest thing to foreshadowing is when I was 12. I always wanted to work to earn my own money because asking my mom for $20 was like a big deal and I didn't want to do that. So I was always looking for jobs to do. And when I was in middle school, I took a job selling newspaper subscriptions door to door. So every day, the newspaper subscription guy would pick me up at my house. He'd drop me off in a neighborhood. I'd go door to door for 3 hours knocking on doors and selling subscriptions to the Glendale News Press. And I think that was an incredible sales lesson. I remember he dropped off a packet on my doorstep the day before work started or a week before the work started. And it had like all of the objections that people could possibly give you at the doorstep. And it would be like, I've got to talk to my wife. I have another, or my husband, I have another newspaper subscription already. I don't read the newspaper, just like 7 different objections you could get. And then the answers to those objections. And then the rule was stay at the door for 6 no's. Like, do not leave until you've gotten 6 no's. And the truth about that was if you stayed for 6 no's, your conversion rate was like meaningfully higher. Like there are very few doors I knocked on where I stayed for 6 no's and still didn't get the deal. Or oftentimes they just gave me the money for the subscription. Was like, I don't want it, but here's $20. So I think I learned a lot about that same sort of like sales discipline still exists in sales. And, your first no is the first door opening to closing a deal. So I think I learned a lot about just sales and being in front of people and being persuasive and not taking no for an answer. So I think that's probably the closest thing to a link you could find.
Did you like that job? Because I would imagine a lot of 12-year-old kids come to a door having they have to sell something and someone says no, like they're going to be terrified and they're going to give up. Obviously you were hard-nosed, but you were okay with that motion and that rejection as well?
So I loved that job because at the end of the night, you got into a car with like 7 other kids who were selling newspaper subscriptions door to door. And you got in and you said how many subscriptions you sold that night. And I always wanted to be the number one seller that evening. And I set like goals for myself every night. There was like a minimum of 8 deals that I wanted to get. I knew what the records were. They're like, one guy got 15 deals one time. Like, so I got paid for every deal. I didn't actually, the money was important because, I wouldn't have been doing it if I wasn't making money. But like the competition is what I really loved about it. I loved being the number one salesperson day in and day out. Like that was definitely the highlight of that experience. Today, I have to, teach my daughter, like, you compete not just to win, but you compete because you love to compete. And the competition is the reason that you do it. You don't get all sideways if you lose. You go back and you compete, but you're competing because you love the art of the competition. So I really loved that we're all competing. And it was the same thing as you find in today's sales floors. Like, Henry had the best route. That's why he sold 10. Henry always gets the best routes. And, like it's the same thing. I would be as good as that guy if I got as many leads. But the trick was like, you can make 10 deals happen regardless of your route. And I loved the competitive aspect of that.
Absolutely. I remember when I was a young sales rep at NetSuite, I would comb through all of the sales orders that were coming through and I would go and look through all of the notes. And realistically, some of it was motivated by jealousy, but I wanted to know what they were doing. And I learned a lot that way.
Yeah, we have this function here at ZoomInfo called a Trojan rep. So when you promote from an SDR into an account executive, the first leads you get are leads that other sales reps have disqualified. You say like, there's no opportunity here. This is a bad fit. And then you get to go in there and close deals that maybe the best sales guy at ZoomInfo disqualified and said wasn't a good deal. But it sort of like creates that same competitive spirit. Like, well, if I can close a deal that Henry disqualified, then I really belong here. But I think competition is just a great motivator.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing about sales too, is that we get to have a scoreboard where others don't.
Totally.
So you obviously have this competitive streak in you. You're willing to be a hardcore IC at the age of 12. The first kind of leadership experience I can point to, if I call it that in my research, is that you became the student body athletic director of your high school. And so you're out there campaigning for a leadership role. So clearly you're not just trying to do things for yourself. You're willing to engage with larger parts of the population. What motivated this?
I wanted to be in student government in high school. I was a freshman going into my sophomore year. I didn't have like a great peer group yet and thought that would be like a great place to have a leadership role, but also to like meet new people. And I ran against a football player who was going into his senior year. And I was again, super competitive. And I was like, how am I going to win this election? Nobody knows me. I didn't play a sport my freshman year. I did my sophomore year. My freshman year, I didn't have a big group. And it was like, well, how am I going to win this election? And I got clever with campaigning and then ended up winning. It was, when I look back on my life, that was definitely one of the proudest moments because I should not have won that election. And I was like way less popular or way less people knew me, but it gave me this like entree into student government and working for the student body president. And so it was a great experience, but also like driven by that competitive spirit. That's
your Trojan election.
That's great research, by the way, Kevin. I don't know where you found that, but like, I don't even remember ever talking about that.
I've been enjoying hanging out on the internet, figuring out, Henry's life here, which brings me to my next question. You went to UNLV to become a hotel manager. So You didn't know about ZoomInfo yet, again, when you were headed into college. Why did you want to be a hotel manager?
Honestly, don't know why I wanted to be a hotel manager. It was, I guess at the time, felt like a fun, compelling career. And then UNLV has the best hospitality school in the country. And thought like, well, that would be great to go get a degree somewhere where I know I'm going to the best possible school for that degree. I think those were kind of the big reasons. It sounded fun.
Yeah, makes sense. The hotels, especially when you're a kid, you're like, wow, I get to stay in a hotel. I hope it has a
Yeah.
pool. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
But so then you get to UNLV and you famously start working at iProfile. I'm curious, what attracted you to iProfile in the first place?
I didn't have any money and I needed a job is the honest answer. Serendipity is amazing, but I had no money. I finished my first year in college and I needed a job. The job paid well, better than other jobs I was applying for, and it hired quickly. I needed to pay rent because I was moving out of the dorms, and here was a job that I knew I could do and would help me get out of credit card debt and put some money away. So those were the reasons. It was on the UNLV job board and it paid well.
So it seems like you were doing multiple things there from the jump, but one of them was selling. Did you have any apprehension about selling, or was it just newspapers all over again? Let's get to work.
I did a little bit of selling there. I think the most interesting lesson I learned there was I used to sit outside. I used to sit a door away from there were only two of us. So me and the CEO. So I could like hear him selling all day long. And he was just taking back to back calls with VPs of sales at technology companies. And he did the same pitch over and over and over again. So by like my third year, I'd heard this exact same pitch hundreds of times, maybe thousands of times. And I would like make fun of the pitch. I would like make little like jokes about it. And then the first day I had to go sell, like I got on a call with the VP of sales at an Austin-based technology company. And I went to like say the words that I had heard him say for many years, that I had made jokes about for many years. And I could not get the words out of my mouth the same way. I sounded like green, not ready, not prepared. Years and years of hearing something and thinking you know how to say it is very different than getting the words out of your mouth. And I learned that lesson the hard way, like on the call. I remember getting off that call and being so humbled because I was like, years of thinking I knew this sales motion that was going to be super easy because he was doing it, 9 times a day. And then now here I am actually pitching the thing and I sound horrible. So one of the things like that I brought to the company when we first started is any new sales rep, I would tell them right away, like go home and say it out loud to your family, say it out loud to your spouse, say it out loud to your friends. Like what you think you're capable of saying out of your mouth is very different when you're actually put to the screws to say it. So today, when I have a big presentation, when I'm rolling out a new talk track, I am saying the words out loud. I'm writing down what I'm going to say verbatim. I don't like do the whole like couple bullet points here, couple bullet points there, and I'll fill in the blanks. I write out word for word what I'm going to say. Then I say it out loud. Inevitably, when you say it out loud, you realize like, oh, that doesn't sound right. That's a weird talking point. I also think through what the arguments against those talking points will be. If I tell you that we grew enterprise sales 10% year over year, I'm in my head going, okay, they're going to ask me about what mid-market looks like, what SMB looks like. Why am I only talking about enterprise sales? And what are my answers to those questions going to be? And so the act of writing out verbatim what you're going to say, saying it out loud, and then thinking through what the follow-up questions are going to be and how you're going to articulate the answers to those follow-up questions. That's a really important skill and process for me.
Absolutely. I'll never forget my mother-in-law asking me about the company that I'd started. And I'd been working on it. It was all I was talking about. All my wife, I'm sure, was talking to her about is Kevin's doing this thing. And she asked me what it was. And I couldn't explain it. And I remember the look of dread in her eyes because her daughter's hitched to me and I have no idea how to explain what my company does. It's terrifying.
It is. It's like I hear people do that all the time. Like try to explain what they do, and they're like, my friend just got a new job, and I was at a get together with him, and they asked him what he did, and it was like the worst possible answer. Like it sounded like he didn't know what he did, and so he finished, and I was like, yeah, you should probably work on that. That's not. Let's talk about how you're going to explain that next time, so you don't sound the same way.
Yeah, well, good that he has you all for practice. So, did you always do that? The next thing that you did at UNLV was a campaign to become student body president. So, presumably, you're giving speeches to a bunch of classes and stuff like that. Did you already have that level of rigor in your preparation and speaking capabilities?
Yes, yes. And I ran a campaign. I became student body president at UNLV my senior year, largely because I had taken a trip to Boston with the founder of iProfile. And he went to school at Brandeis. And he took me to the school at Brandeis. And Brandeis is a very different school than UNLV. UNLV is at the time, was largely a commuter campus. People weren't really connected to the university or to student life. And then I came out to Boston. I saw Brandeis. He literally walked in. Guy at the time was, I think, call it 45, 50 years old. Walked into a class, like a professor's office who had been his professor 25 years earlier. And she remembered him and he remembered her and they hugged and the school was small and everybody felt like they were connecting in a unique way. And I got really frustrated about the fact that I had chosen like a commuter campus and I never really had the student life experience that I had imagined when I was leaving high school and going to college. And I became like down on the decision and why I was there and down on the school. And then at some point I went like, okay, what are you going to do about it? Like, here you are, you're in your junior year, you're just complaining about your school. Like, what are you going to do? And then I decided like, oh, I'm going to run for student body president. I'm going to get involved in student government. And I had to run against people like who had been in student government for many years. And so I ran this campaign that basically said the student government is wasting your money, your student fees, which they were. And then I printed off the full catalog of the university classes. And I knew and then I would try to get 2 classes in every period. So I would go at the beginning of a class starting. I'd go to a professor and say like, hey, I'm running for student body president. Do you mind giving me 3 minutes at the beginning of your class to talk to the students about my campaign? And I did that for months all over the campus. Like I walked all over. I knew every class. I made sure I'd talk to the science students, the business students, the hotel students. And I did that for months and also lost a bunch of weight because I was trekking across the campus for months and running this like dark horse contrarian campaign. And another really super, super amazing learning experience because UNLV has a really unique student government. I don't know if your listeners, nobody cares about this, but it's unique in that it's independent from the university. It has a $2 million annual budget. It has multiple university staff that actually report to the student body president. And the student body president gets a salary. I made like at the time $2,000 a month plus a full tuition waiver. So I didn't pay for any books or tuition and I got a salary and I got to hire people to help me build the government. Basically, we were in charge of events and funding of campus organizations. So it was this big meaty job that I treated like a business. I treated it like I was running a company. And so I cut out waste. The campus always lost money on events that it held. I made money on the events that we held. So we broke even made a little bit of money. Nobody thought that was possible, but I really took the job very seriously. And I was like, I'm going to run this thing like a business once I'm in there.
Wow. So you've got your Trojan election and then you invented Doge for this election.
I did invent Doge for the UNLV student government.
I love that. I love that. And meanwhile, it seems like during this time, in the evenings, you're starting your nightclub promotion business. So this is a similarity between you, Richard Branson, Mark Cuban, I think Michael Rubin, all entrepreneurs that at some point couldn't help themselves because they were just probably good salespeople. So can you tell the story of how you ended up doing this?
Sure. The story is funny. I was dating at the time my wife now, and her dad ran the nightclubs at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, Studio 54, this place called Taboo, and another up and coming place called Teatro. And I was studying for the LSAT. I was studying for the LSAT to go to law school, and I needed work, but I wanted work that was like didn't require any cognitive load because I would be studying like 10, 11 hours a day for the LSAT. And then I would go, and I wanted a job that I could go do after without having to, use my brain that much. And so I was like, can I be a barback? Like the barbacks at the at the clubs, they'd make like $600 a night. They're doing like, you're getting bottle service tips. And so I was like, I'll just go around. I just pick up trash, take the bottles away, clean stuff up. I'll make $600 a night. That'll be great. And so I went to meet with my wife's dad, and he was like, you don't want that job. You don't want that job. What you really want, you're student body president at UNLV. You're like an extroverted guy. Go do nightclub promotions for this new club. You'll make like $5 for every person you bring in, because they knew like the average spend was $20 for every person who came in. You'll make $5 for each person who comes in. And I was like, no way, I'm not doing that. But I couldn't like tell my wife's dad, like, no, I don't want this like way better job that you're giving me. I want to just like pick up bottles at the end of the night. Like, that's the job I want. So on the day that I was going to go, I finally got the courage up to go tell him like, this is not the right gig for me. And it was like the Wednesday before the first Saturday I was supposed to like do this promotions gig. He wasn't available to meet with me. And I was like, okay, that's it. I've got to do this thing. So I enlisted a friend to fill the place. He filled the place. Then he filled the place again. And then I was like, okay, we're making some money here. Let's see how long I can run this out. And I remember telling another friend who lived in Santa Barbara, I hate this job. It's the dumbest job. I hate it. And he was like, wait, let me get this right. You get paid to bring people to a club and you give them like free drinks. This sounds like the greatest job. I'll just move to Las Vegas and like do it with you. So he moved to Las Vegas. We ended up with like 30 employees, 35 employees at one point, doing nightclub promotions for the MGM. And then I realized, because of a learning at iProfile, one of the learnings that I had, and my boss told me, he was like, I sell the contract to the VP of sales. He loves it. And then he leaves the company, and at renewal time, nobody knows what iProfile is. And then I don't get the renewal. The sales process starts all over again. And then I remember in Christmas of 2005, I just started thinking like, what if my wife's dad is no longer at the MGM and I've got 35 employees, like I have a single point of failure. If he leaves, I'm going to end up in the same scenario as these renewals. So I just went around to other hotels in Las Vegas, other clubs, and I said like, hey, we're running this super successful thing at the MGM. I'm sure we could be successful for you guys too. Do you want to meet to talk about what we're doing there? And then I got contracts at the Caesar's Palace and at the Mandalay Bay and at the Paris. And so then I had multiple contracts, and I was kind of spreading out these people to multiple venues across Las Vegas.
I think your wife's dad might have known that was going to happen. He was trying to keep you in Vegas. What do you think about that conspiracy theory?
I don't think so. He knew I was leaving.
And you were studying for law school, and you mentioned that you were doing so because you thought it was a noble profession.
Yep.
And so what's your internal dialogue at this point that's telling you need to find a noble profession?
I think my internal dialogue is telling me, honestly, like, really unfortunate, but I think my internal dialogue was telling me like sales and business is like not a noble career path. That like, if you're a lawyer, people like look up to you, and it has this air of like, you're educated and you're like who's like using your brain for special things. And I just felt like it was this noble type of role that business wasn't. And a guy who worked for me in the nightclub promotions business, when I was telling him this, I don't know why this stuck with me, but he was like, I don't know what you're talking about. You are business, Henry. You are business. All you think about is business. Like, you are business. I don't know why you're running away from this thing. And I was like, whatever. No, I'm going to be a lawyer. So that was like my head thrash. And it's so unfortunate because I think salespeople today, I think it's one of the most noble professions. You are helping people figure out how to run their businesses better by introducing them to technology or services or products that they didn't know existed. And when we started ZoomInfo, I remember I got a cold call from a guy selling like marketing automation technology. And he was like, hey, come to this webinar. We're going to teach you how to use marketing automation technology. And I was like, I'm already doing outbound email marketing. Like, I don't really need to come to this webinar. It's like, this is different. Just come to the webinar and see what you learn. So I was like, fine. Go to this webinar, and the advancement from where I was to what the software product could deliver was like night and day. And I went to this webinar and I went like, okay, like I'm definitely migrating to this software. It's going to be our CRM and our marketing automation. We built the demand gen backbone of ZoomInfo in the early days off of this software that I wouldn't have even known existed and was hesitant to engage with had a seller not picked up the phone and called me. Like that changed our business. And so I really do believe today it's an incredibly noble profession. But I think growing up, your only interaction with salespeople is largely like you feel like them trying to sell you something that you don't actually want. And like today, I view it totally differently. I view it as like, let's see how good this person is at convincing me to spend my money on the thing that they're passionate about.
Hmm.
And so I have a lot of like love for the art of sales, the science too, but particularly the art, where I think people still today view that function as like trying to get me to do something I don't want to do instead of like convincing me to see the world a little bit differently.
Yeah, your internal dialogue resonates a lot. When I was coming out of college and I remember I was going to take my first sales job, it was very natural for me. But I remember thinking to tell my friends who are either going to med school or whatever that like, no, yeah, I'm going to be cold calling people. Like that's how I'm going to spend my day. And you get some looks, but over time you realize that no, you can be of great help to people.
Totally.
So I'm fast forwarding a bit, but you famously start Discover Org from your apartment. So at some point you realize it is what you want to pursue. What's your personal mission at that point for starting the company?
Honestly, I saw a real market opportunity and I thought that it could be monetized in a real way. And so like I didn't have grand goals of building a public company or having thousands of employees. I thought like, hey, I learned a lot from my time at iProfile. I can leverage that here to start a business that makes me good money. That's kind of how I thought of it.
And you carried a bag for the first 6 years of Discover Org's existence. Can you take me through Henry the salesperson from, you started with newspapers, you're understanding things at iProfile. Now you've been 6 years with your own company. Where are you now as a salesperson?
Like when we started, like those first 6 years. Is that what
Yeah,
you mean?
yeah. Your evolution of those 6 years.
Yeah, like so number one, I was building the product at the same time I was selling the product. So I understood like the guts of the product and I was also onboarding our clients and doing trainings. So I also understood where people were getting value out of the product. I understood what landed, what didn't land. I knew like if they asked a question, I knew like how to show them an answer in the product, use the product to sell. And so I was a pretty technical seller, would understand before the calls, I would understand who the company was. I would understand who their buyers were. And then I would pre-map what I was going to show them in the platform. And so the product did a lot of the selling in the early days. And I was just basically a conduit between the prospect and the platform, and I let the platform show off. And it was a very unique offering. People hadn't seen anything like it before. There was great product market fit. And so I was largely letting the product sell against a problem that I knew all of my prospects were having.
Was it hard for you to transition away from being on the front lines all the time, carrying the bag, having other people do that for you?
Totally. I think like every entrepreneur probably goes through this phase where you have to figure out how to add value in a different way than just executing against like a demand generation campaign or a sales call. I will tell you the first 5 sellers that we brought on to ZoomInfo, like they would come in, they were all new sellers. We were bootstrapped, so I couldn't go hire like Google's best sales rep. I had to hire people who had never had sales experience who thought they wanted to be in sales. And then I was on every one of their calls and I saw every single one of their emails. And so like I would shadow them for the first couple of months until I got to a place where I was like, okay, 9 out of 10 times they're saying and doing exactly what I would do. I'm out of this thing and going off to the next thing. And then they could collaborate with me when they wanted. But I was pretty hands-on to make sure like the process and system that I had built, the way that we follow up with people, the value we send, the way that we answer questions was very aligned to the way that I was doing selling in the early days and making sure that everybody was following that same process. Great learning that I had there, by the way, is that there are sellers who are like great technically on the product. They can answer any objection. They can think, they know what the prospect is going to say before they say it. Then there are sellers who are not as good at those things, but they maniacally follow the process you put in front of them. They do the demo, they do the slides the way you tell them, they do the demo the way that you tell them, they follow up religiously after the way that you tell them, they send value, they do all of the things that you tell them to do. And those sellers often outperform their more talented counterparts who don't run the process exactly the way you outline or prescribe. That was a great learning for me. Today, I see it all the time. There are great sellers who follow the process, and there are people who understand the little nuances of the product. And both of those sellers can be great, but the person who understands the nuances of the product and really understands the customer's pain point, really understands how that pain point connects to the product, are often confused that someone who doesn't know the product or the use cases as well can be as successful just by adhering to the sales process.
That's interesting. I'm reading Anthony Bourdain's book about Kitchen Confidential right now, and he talks about the difference in artists and craftsmen and chefs. And the artists can reach this high level, but they just don't have the system down. And so he advocates for craftsmen. And what you just said made me think about that so much.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You got to know what you're going to do and have it be repeatable. All right, so I have a couple more questions here. You mentioned that when you started ZoomInfo, or you started Discover.org, it was because you saw a market opportunity. You have since become CEO of ZoomInfo's evolving iterations, and so at some point you had to have set like a clear intention about what you wanted the future to be versus just organically kind of continuing to grow through the role. Can you talk about that balance for what you want out of your life?
Yeah, look, I think every stage of the company, I had like a different goal. And I think when we brought the company I started was called Discover.org. When we brought Discover.org and ZoomInfo together in 2019, I think it was like I recognized how big the market opportunity was and that we were in the best position to attack that market opportunity. And so I saw a much bigger company. I saw like a company that could IPO and be public. I felt the culture we had built at the company was a differentiator, and that we could continue to grow the business. And we, fast forward a year, we IPO'd the business. The business, in 2021 was growing 60% year over year with 40% margins. We had multiple rule of 100 quarters. And then, this like tech SaaS scrutiny thing happened at the end of 2022 and 2023. And then the new goal of the company became like, how do we emerge out of this stronger with a more durable company profile? Very few, I don't know if any companies grow, maybe NVIDIA at this point, grow 60% year over year forever. But great companies figure out how to grow, do that profitably for many, many, many years, decades. And so that sort of like just figure out how to grow mentality shifted over the last few years to figure out how to grow durably. How do you build a really durable company? How do you build product that's durable? How do you have an engineering team that delivers at high velocity? How do you have a go-to-market team that can really translate what the product is building so the buyer understands how that can impact their business? And how do you build the foundation for that to be really durable over the long term? That's really what I'm focused on today. I think ZoomInfo has the potential to be here for decades and decades and decades. And what are the things that I need to make sure are happening inside of ZoomInfo today to set us up for that future?
I love that answer. I think that's great for entrepreneurs listening, because I kind of teed it up wondering what was motivating you, but it's about what the company necessitates from you as its leader.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think like I'm constantly listening at the company to understand what it needs. And I think I understand the company Like I know I'll forget more about the company tonight than most people coming in the company will ever know about the company. But it's really about how I use that knowledge to drive forward whatever strategy or vision that we have in the business.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, my last question. When you talk about your internal dialogue of thinking about law school, I think that resonates with a lot of people that'll listen to this who are getting into sales or the revenue world or a technology that maybe they didn't set out to, but they're there and they're maybe doing a great job. So I'm wondering what advice you would give to yourself when you're thinking about law school, how you would console a young Henry and say, now that I've been to the mountaintop, this is kind of what I would tell you.
So a couple of things. One, when I think about just the sales profession, I think like one of the things that's lost is that the work that your go-to-market organization does, if you're a founder and you're focused exclusively on product, first of all, you have to have a great product. It's just there's no cutting the corners. The product has to be amazing. Once you have that, the only way to do justice or to honor the work that went into building a really great product is to have a really great go-to-market organization. Otherwise, you're just a hobbyist. And you're a hobbyist who built a nice product. But until you have a go-to-market organization that's efficient and repeatable and scalable, you're just a hobbyist. And what go-to-market teams do is they turn really great products into commercial opportunities. And without great go-to-market professionals, without great sales professionals, all that work, that product and engineering sweat and bleed to deliver to the customer never actually makes it to a customer or never actually makes it to enough customers. And so if you want to honor the work that your product and engineering teams are doing, it is incumbent on you to make sure that they have a counterpart in go-to-market that can do justice to that work. I think that's the first thing that I don't hear a lot of people talking about, but that is the fundamental give back to the product and the product and engineering organization that great go-to-market organizations drive. If I'm thinking about what advice I would give my starting law school self, man, I've had such an amazing journey, Kevin. It's hard to like have regrets or, say I would do anything like really differently. I would probably just tell my younger self that when you build a team, when you build a business, the business is a team sport first. It's a team sport and it's a team sport first. And make sure that you're building a strong team, a team that collaborates and roots for each other and supports each other and use their first obligation as ZoomInfo. And team number one is ZoomInfo. Team number two is them and their team, but team number one is ZoomInfo, and make sure you have a team and a culture that respects that.
No, that's a super positive note to end on. Not just about the amount of newspapers I sold, it's about the future of the newspaper itself and how we help it get there. So Henry,
100%.
Thanks so much for joining us and taking us through your story, especially in crunch time here at the end of December. I hope everything goes amazingly for the ZoomInfo team.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for having me.